My VP asked me out, I said no, so he tried to get me fired. He didn't know I'd been recording everything. I need to get this off my chest because I still can't believe I lived through it, and honestly, some days I still don't feel safe saying his name out loud. I'll call him Grant. Not his real name, obviously, but close enough that anyone who worked at that company will know exactly who I mean. I was 29, 3 years into my job as a senior account manager at a mid-size logistics software company in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was good at my job. Not trying hard good, actually good. 2 years running Employee of the Quarter nominations. A client retention rate that made my numbers the best on the team. And a boss who used to tell people I was going to run this place someday. I believed him. That's the part that kills me now, looking back, how much I believed in where I was headed. Grant became our VP of sales about 8 months before everything happened. Came in from a competitor with this big energy, glad-handing everyone, memorizing people's kids' names within a week. I liked him at first. Everyone did. He was one of those guys who made you feel like the smartest person in the room, right up until you weren't useful to him anymore. It started small. He'd stop by my desk more than anyone else's. He'd ask me to grab coffee to talk strategy, and then spend 40 minutes asking about my weekend. He commented on my clothes in a way that was just barely on the acceptable side of the line. The kind of comment you replay later and think, wait, was that actually weird? Was I imagining it? I wasn't imagining it. The night it became impossible to pretend otherwise, we were at a company dinner after closing a big regional deal. 6 of us at the table, plenty of wine, the kind of night where everyone's guard is down. Grant asked to speak to me outside for a minute. Work stuff. I remember exactly what he said because I've replayed it 1,000 times since. I think you and I could be something really good together, not just professionally. I laughed it off first because that's what you do, right? You try to make it not a thing. I said something like, Grant, I think you've had one too many, and started to walk back inside. He grabbed my wrist. Not hard, not dramatic, just enough to stop me and say, I'm serious. Think about it, I can do a lot for your career. I told him no, clearly, directly. I said I wasn't interested in him like that, and I needed him to never bring it up again. I walked back inside, sat down, and finished my glass of wine like my hands weren't shaking under the table. For about 2 weeks, nothing happened, and I actually let myself believe it was over. That he'd respect it, that I'd dodged something and we could go back to being VP and account manager, nothing more, nothing less. Then my numbers started getting reviewed. It began with an email. Grant CC'd my director on a note asking why my Q3 pipeline projections seemed inflated compared to historical trends. I'd used the exact same methodology I'd used for 2 years. Nobody had ever questioned it before. I pulled the receipts, sent back a breakdown proving my numbers were accurate, even conservative. He replied, good to know, appreciate the clarification, publicly gracious, privately relentless. Because a week later, I got pulled into a meeting with him and someone from HR named Patricia. Grant sat across from me with a manila folder and told me there had been concerns raised about my performance, missed deadlines, client complaints. A pattern of unprofessional communication. None of it was real, not one word of it. I sat there while he read off a list of supposed infractions, and I felt the floor tilt under me because I realized in that moment exactly what was happening. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan. He was building a paper trail to fire me, and he was doing it with HR sitting right there, nodding along like it was routine. I asked for specifics. Which client complained? Which deadline was missed? Patricia said she'd follow up with documentation. She never did. Not once, over the following 6 weeks, did anyone produce a single shred of evidence for any of it. But the performance improvement plan still landed in my inbox 3 days later. 90 days to demonstrate improvement, or termination. I called my mom crying that night, which I never do. She's the practical one in the family, the one who worked as a paralegal for 22 years before she retired, and she said something that changed the entire direction of what happened next. She said, "Sweetheart, if this is retaliation, it's not enough to know it happened. You have to be able to prove it." So I started documenting everything. I want to be clear about something, because people always ask this part. North Carolina is a one-party consent state, meaning it's legal to record a conversation you're part of without telling the other person. I checked 3 times before I did anything, because the last thing I needed was to hand Grant a new weapon by breaking a law myself. I started keeping a detailed log, dates, times, exact wording of every interaction. I saved every email. And the next time Grant asked me to grab coffee to talk about my PIP progress, I brought a small recorder in my bag. That conversation is the reason I'm not currently unemployed, broke, and blacklisted from an entire industry. Because 40 minutes in, after a lot of vague performance talk, Grant said this, word for word. "You know, none of this would even be happening if you'd just given me a chance. I could have made this so much easier for you." I asked him directly, and I'll never forget how calm my own voice sounded. Because inside I was shaking. "Are you saying my performance review is connected to me turning you down?" He laughed. He actually laughed like I'd said something absurd and said, "I'm saying relationships matter around here, that's all." I had it, on tape, in his own voice. But here's the part that made my stomach drop even further. 2 days after that recording, I was in the break room and overheard 2 women from the marketing team talking in hushed voices. One of them, Alicia, had been at the company almost as long as I had. She was talking about a weird vibe from Grant, about being asked to dinner to discuss the rebrand, about feeling like she couldn't say no without it affecting her standing. I pulled her aside privately that same day. I didn't tell her everything, not at first. I just asked if she'd ever felt uncomfortable around him, and she started crying. Actual tears, right there in the stairwell. Alicia had turned him down 4 months earlier, right before her department got restructured and her role got quietly folded into someone else's. She'd never connected the dots publicly. She thought it was a coincidence. She thought she was imagining it, exactly like I almost had. That's when I understood the full shape of what I was dealing with. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment from a guy who got a rejection and reacted badly. This was a pattern, a method. Ask, get rejected, retaliate quietly enough that nobody could ever prove it, repeat with someone new. I asked Alicia if she'd be willing to talk to an employment attorney, just to see what our options were, no commitment. She said yes before I even finished the sentence. I found a lawyer named Renata Cole, who specialized in workplace retaliation and hostile work environment cases. I brought her the recording, my documentation log, the fabricated PIP, and every email showing the sudden and unexplained shift in how my performance was characterized. Alicia brought her own account, plus a text message from a friend in HR who'd mentioned, off the record, just venting, that there had been more than one complaint about Grant over the years that just kind of disappeared. Renata's face, when she reviewed everything, is something I'll remember for the rest of my life. She looked up from the folder and said, "This isn't just a strong case. This is the kind of case that makes a company settle before it ever sees a courtroom, or it's the kind that makes an example out of someone in front of a jury. Either way, he's done." We filed a formal complaint with HR first, per her advice, to create an official record before going further. I sat across from a different HR director this time, the head of the department, not Patricia, and played the recording. I watched her face change in real time as she heard Grant's own voice connect my PIP directly to my rejection of him. She launched an internal investigation within 24 hours. And once that door opened, it didn't just open for me. 3 more women came forward within the same week. One had left the company entirely 18 months earlier rather than deal with him. And she'd never told anyone why until she saw the internal investigation notice go out and realized she wasn't the only one who'd stayed quiet out of fear nobody would believe her. Grant was placed on administrative leave, within 48 hours of the fourth complaint. The company brought in an outside law firm to handle the investigation, which honestly should have told everyone everything they needed to know about how serious it had gotten internally. The investigation took 6 weeks. During that time, my PIP was formally rescinded and wiped from my file, in writing, with an apology from the company, the first real apology anyone had given me since this started. But rescinding a PIP doesn't undo the humiliation of sitting in that room while a man lied to my face with HR watching. It doesn't undo the sleepless nights or the panic attacks I started having in the parking garage before every single meeting with him. The findings came back unambiguous. Grant had engaged in a documented pattern of retaliatory conduct against at least 4 employees, 3 of whom were formally interviewed and corroborated key details independently of each other. The company terminated him for cause, effective immediately, and I later learned through Renata that they'd also reported the findings to their board given the severity and pattern of the conduct. But it didn't stop at termination. Because North Carolina, like most states, allows for both civil claims and, in cases involving coercion tied to employment benefits, potential criminal exposure depending on the specifics. Renata filed a civil suit against both Grant and the company for retaliation and creating a hostile work environment. Alicia joined as a co-plaintiff. And separately, the district attorney's office opened an inquiry after Renata forwarded the recording as part of a broader pattern that touched on extortion-adjacent conduct, essentially using professional consequences as leverage to coerce a personal relationship, which prosecutors took seriously given how many women were affected. I won't pretend the legal process was fast or clean, because it wasn't. It took another 11 months of depositions, mediation attempts that Grant's attorneys tried and failed to use to make it all disappear quietly, and more retelling of that stairwell conversation and that dinner outside the restaurant than I ever wanted to say out loud again. But it ended with a settlement from the company that Renata called generous, because they knew exactly what a jury would do to them if this went to trial, plus a separate settlement from Grant personally, and a guilty plea on a lesser charge tied to workplace coercion that kept him out of prison, but left him with a permanent record and a professional reputation that no logistics company in the Southeast will ever touch again. Alicia got her own settlement too, and the 2 of us still get lunch every couple of months, which is maybe the one genuinely good thing that came out of all of it. We joke, darkly, that we started a support group nobody wants to join. I stayed at the company for another 8 months after the investigation closed, mostly because Renata told me it would look better for the case if I wasn't seen as fleeing under pressure. But I never felt fully comfortable there again. Not really, not in a building where that many people had known something was wrong for that long and said nothing until they had no choice. Update 4 months later. I want to update you all because so many people asked what happened after the case settled. I left the company 2 months ago. Not because anyone pushed me out. This time, for once, it was entirely my decision. I took a role at a competitor as a senior director of client success. A title jump I'm not sure I would have gotten this fast anywhere else, and my new manager is, refreshingly, a woman who has zero interest in anything other than whether I hit my numbers. Grant, for what it's worth, has not resurfaced professionally that I'm aware of. Renata mentioned in our last call that his LinkedIn is basically a ghost town now, no current employer listed, no recommendations. Small comfort, but I'll take it. The thing I keep coming back to, the thing I want anyone reading this to actually hear, is this. I almost didn't record that conversation. I almost told myself I was overreacting, that documenting things felt paranoid, that maybe I should just try harder to make the PIP go away quietly and move on. If my mom hadn't pushed me to think about proof instead of just feelings, I genuinely don't know where I'd be right now. Probably unemployed, definitely without the kind of closure I have today. If something feels wrong at work and you can't explain exactly why, trust that feeling enough to start writing things down. You might never need it. But if you do, it might be the only thing that saves you.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want more fascinating Reddit tales, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to Archives of Reddit. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.